G'day, it's Jamie, and welcome to Where's My Yowie. Today, I'm reading an old newspaper report about bunyips, so we'll get into it. This was published in Melbourne's The Argus on Friday, the 14th of December, 1951, titled Bunyips Never Whistle. It's Australia's mystery animal, and you usually see it on your way home from a shanty pub in the early hours of the morning, by Alan Marshall. When old Paddy Bourke saw a bunyip in a lignum swamp in 1936, he ran 2 miles with his coattails cracking like whips. There was a mob of sheep up by Christensen's boundary, and Christensen reckoned Poddy went over the flock before any of the sheep he stood on had time to get up to their feet again. Anyway, that's what Christensen told me. He lives near Wilcannia, and I know him well. All he could get out of Poddy, he said, was the statement, "It was as wet as a shag." And Poddy gasped out this description every time he lowered the bottle. Well, Poddy's dead now, and I'll never know what that bunyip looked like. But one need never go short of a description of this fabulous creature when you wander around amongst the old-timers of the bush. There is always some old chap who has seen, heard or smelled a bunyip in his time, and you will generally find him with his head on his hands sitting on the steps of some bush shanty. In the Balranald pub, an imperturbable old hatter from the back country told me of a teamster who saw a bunyip with teeth like a cross-cut saw rear out of a lagoon and bellow at him. The teamster made for the old fellow's hut without investigating further, and he lost no time in getting there. You'd have thought he'd lost a trace chain, the fuss he made about it, the old chap told me. This bearded old-timer had never seen a bunyip himself, but he had heard plenty of them, he said. He had a wonderful vocabulary of words denoting the cries of animals, and he used the lot in describing the bunyip's call. According to him, the animal growled, groaned, hissed, roared, boomed, yelled and screeched. After listening to this and searching my mind for another suitable word to pass on to him, I asked him with my pencil poised over my notebook, "Do they ever whistle?" The question seemed to astound him. Then he recovered and, thrusting his pugnacious jaw close to mine, he gave an emphatic no between his teeth. He closed down after that, and thereafter our relationship became strained. He never mentioned bunyips again. The bunyip had its origin in the folk tales of the Aborigines. Long before the white man came, the natives believed in the existence of some dark creature of monstrous size that lived in the swamps, lagoons and billabongs of their tribal lands. Their descriptions of it varied, but they were all in agreement in describing its shiny, baleful eyes and its bellowing voice. It had a huge body, either covered with fur or feathers, and where its legs should have been, there were flippers that threshed the water when it was angry. It devoured human beings, coming upon them in silence and when least expected. The Aborigines I questioned about the bunyip always added, with some satisfaction, that it favoured women. In a drawing of the bunyip made by a Murray River Aboriginal in 1848, the creature is depicted as having a body resembling that of a hippopotamus and the head like that of a horse. However, another drawing made by a Victorian Aboriginal showed it with the head and neck of an emu. Governor Latrobe also made a drawing of the bunyip. He believed there were 2 kinds of bunyip, a southern and a northern type. His drawing of the southern bunyip was sent to Tasmania, but has been lost. Buckley, the wild white man, gave an account of the bunyips he had seen in his wanderings with the Aborigines. It was hard to get any information from Buckley, but on the subject of bunyips, he was quite talkative. In The Life and Adventures of William Buckley by John Morgan, published in 1852, Buckley said bunyips were often seen in the Barwon River. The creatures only appear when the weather is very calm and water smooth, he said. He went on to say that they were about the size of a full-grown calf and sometimes larger. A report of a bunyip seen at Wagga Wagga was given to the Advocate on April 13, 1872. It was swimming at some speed in the Midgeon Lagoon and was watched by a party of settlers, the report said. It was half as long as a retriever dog. The hair all over its body was jet black and shiny, and very long, say 5 inches. There was too much hair to see its eyes. The ears were well developed, and the party had a splendid view of it for half an hour before it swam away quietly. In 1873, the Wagga Wagga Express said the bunyip had been seen twice within 3 months in Cow Lake. A party of surveyors who saw it described it as having a head like an old man Aborigine with long, dark-coloured hair. The same animal was seen several weeks later by a white man out in a canoe. We should be able to believe the evidence of Major Couchman. He was the chief mining surveyor in the mining department, and when visiting the Malmesbury Reservoir, he saw an animal with a head like a seal swimming in the water. The Reverend George Taplin, according to his book The Narranyeri, often heard booming and explosive sounds on Lake Alexandrina. The Aborigines there told him it was the bunyip. Every tribe living where swamps and marshes were common knew of the bunyip, but they all had different names for it. It was the Western Murray River Aborigines who called it the bunyip. There are tales of this creature from Western Australia, from Tasmania, from Queensland. Quite another number of people saw a strange animal in Tasmania's Great Lake. Mr. Charles Headlam, who was rowing on the lake, nearly bumped into an animal the size of a well-developed sheepdog. There were some fantastic descriptions of bunyips given by writers 100 years ago when, apparently, the animal was more common than it is today. W. Westgarth in Australian Felix, 1848, described the bunyip as a huge animal of extraordinary appearance. It had a round head, an elongated neck, with a body and tail resembling an ox. G.C. Mundy in Our Antipodes, 1855, described it as a sort of half-horse, half-alligator, haunting the wide and reedy swamps and lagoons of the interior. In the paper, Once a Week, of December 31st, 1885, there is an article, The Bulla Bulla Bunyip, which, after stating that this creature had taken temporary lodging outside the town, described it as being bigger than an elephant, in shape like a poley bullock, with eyes like live coals and tusks like a walrus. My own experiences with bushmen and their tales suggest that bunyips are usually seen in swamps near bush shanties. They are never seen by men going to shanties, only by men on their way home. Those men who go home early often hear them, but never see them. Those who stagger off around midnight frequently see them. Those who leave the shanty just before dawn are the ones who are chased by them. I have quite a lot of evidence to support this theory. It is significant that those bunyips seen by a party of men in places where there are no shanties generally resemble dogs. In the early days, seals were more plentiful round our coast than they are today. Odd seals made their way up flooded rivers and found themselves trapped in billabongs and lagoons of higher reach places. In 1890, Mr. T.E. Daly, who was then chairman of the South Australian Pastoral Board, records having seen a seal in the Murray at Overland Corner, 250 miles from the sea. Nearly 100 years ago, a seal was actually shot in the lagoon near Conago, New South Wales, and for many years its stuffed body could be seen over the fireplace at the Conago Hotel. Seals may account for many descriptions of strange animals seen in swamplands, but it doesn't account for the hollow booms and bellows often heard in these places. It was left to the Argos to explain that. In the issue of June 23, 1894, there is this item. The hollow boom, so often heard on the margins of reedy swamps, more hollow and louder by night than day, is the mythical bunyip, the actual bittern. So there you are. Our brown bittern is the culprit. Here it is who cries at night from the depths of lonely swamps. Bushmen call him the boomer. Some refer to him as the bullbird. Only last week, Mr. Leo Hodge of Foxton, near Haywood, had an experience he says he wouldn't like repeated. He was walking over the stones of his property one dark night when he heard a sound coming from the swamp. I've never heard anything more terrifying, he said. I knew it was a bittern, but I still felt my flesh creep. It resembled the sound of a bull roaring with its head under water, a booming sound with a bubble in it. I could understand then how the myth of the bunyip originated. As a child, I often heard bitterns call from clumps of rushes along the banks of Emu Creek. I was not afraid of the sound. Then as I grew older and heard tales of strange creatures inhabiting swamps and lagoons, creatures that roared in the night, the cry of this bird froze me into stillness, and I listened with muscles tense like one afraid. It was at Hopetown in the Mallee when I first saw one. I was camped beside that bridge where the bottle swallows nest. The black box trees around my caravan were twisted into attitudes of distress, and at night their old limbs, stooped trunks stood out against the gleam of the swamp where water birds lived. It was a good setting for a bunyip. Later, when the listening darkness had moved out over the water and the gleam had gone, the bitterns began quietly at first, then louder till their boom was a bellow, and my eyes, staring into the dark, saw the shadows of the slow-moving monsters rearing upwards and sinking again. Your imagination works that way when bitterns are calling. I knew then why Potty Bork rode 2 miles and finished off a bottle of plonk in as many minutes when he got to Christensen's. One day I walked around the swamp, and on my way back I sat beneath a black box tree for rest. I looked upwards to the limbs just above my head, and there sat a brown bittern, trying its hardest to look like a broken limb. His wide open yellow eyes glared malevolently down at me. I smiled as I looked at him. So you are the bunyip, I thought. I swear he winked at me. The end. I like that story. I reckon that's pretty classic. I like how the writer says, those men who go home early from the pub often hear them but never see them. Those who stagger off around midnight from the pub frequently see them. And those who leave the pub just before dawn are the ones who are chased by them. I reckon that's a classic, that. Okay, that's it from me. I'll get back to you all next time. Bye.